there's a quiet assumption people make about you. If you prefer cats over dogs, you're distant, cold, maybe a little antisocial. But what if the truth is the exact opposite? What if your love for cats reveals something far more psychologically complex than most people realize? What if it says you understand something about connection that others don't? Let me show you what's actually happening in your brain. In 2010, researchers at the University of Texas conducted a personality study with over 4,000 participants. They wanted to know if pet preference correlated with psychological traits. What they found wasn't what anyone expected. People who preferred cats scored significantly higher on openness to experience. They were more curious, more imaginative, more comfortable with abstract thinking. But here's the part that matters. They also scored higher on a trait called sensitivity to subtlety. That's not a weakness. That's a different operating system. Your brain notices what others miss. The shift in tone, the hesitation before someone speaks, the energy in a room that doesn't match the words being said. You read between the lines because your nervous system is wired to process layers of information most people never register, and that changes how you connect. Dogs offer something immediate: enthusiasm, approval, unconditional loyalty with no ambiguity. Cats offer something else entirely. They offer earned trust, and that difference is neurological. When a dog greets you at the door, your brain gets a dopamine hit. Fast reward, clear feedback. It feels good because it's predictable. But when a cat chooses to sit beside you after ignoring you all day, your brain releases oxytocin in a completely different way. It's quieter, deeper. It registers as meaningful rather than just pleasurable. Because you didn't demand it. You didn't perform for it. The cat decided you were worth its time. And for someone wired like you, that matters more than enthusiasm ever could. Here's what most people don't understand about you. You don't avoid connection. You avoid false connection. You avoid false connection. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive load theory. It explains how your brain allocates mental resources. When you're highly sensitive to social cues, every interaction carries more data, more to process, more to interpret. Small talk isn't small for you. It's exhausting. Performing emotion you don't feel isn't polite. It's depleting. So you've learned to be selective. Not because you don't care about people, but because you care deeply about authenticity. And cats reflect that back to you. A cat doesn't pretend. It doesn't perform affection to make you comfortable. This is the area. When it purrs in your lap, you know it's real. When it walks away, you don't take it personally. There's no translation required, no performance, no guessing. Just honest, reciprocal presence. 2017, a study published in the journal Anthropology examined the attachment styles of cat owners versus dog owners. The findings were striking. Cat owners were more likely to have what psychologists call a secure, autonomous attachment style. That means they're comfortable with closeness, but they don't need constant reassurance. They can be alone without feeling abandoned. They can connect without losing themselves. Dog owners, on the other hand, skew toward anxious or avoidant attachment patterns. Now, that doesn't mean one is better than the other, but it does mean something about how you relate to independence. You don't see solitude as loneliness. You see it as restoration. You don't see space as rejection. You see it as respect. And when someone or something meets you in that space without trying to collapse it, your nervous system recognizes it as safe. Let me tell you what's happening on a brain level. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and social interpretation, is constantly scanning for congruence. It's asking, does this behavior match the intention behind it? When someone says they care but their actions don't align, your brain flags it. Not consciously, always, but it registers as off. That's why forced cheerfulness feels hollow to you. Why performative kindness makes you uncomfortable. Your brain is built to detect misalignment. Cats don't have that misalignment. Cats' behavior is its intention. There's no gap. No pretense. So when you're with a cat, your prefrontal cortex gets to rest. You're not translating. You're not compensating. You're just being. And that state neurologically is where your brain feels most at home. Here's the part no one talks about. Loving cats doesn't mean you're introverted. It means you value agency. A 2019 study from Carroll University found that cat people scored higher on a psychological trait called nonconformity. They were less likely to follow social scripts, less interested in doing things just because everyone else does. They questioned norms. They thought independently. They made decisions based on internal values rather than external validation. Sound familiar? You don't love cats because you're shy. You love them because they mirror a worldview you already hold. That connection should be chosen, not obligated. That presence is more valuable than performance. That being wanted is better than being needed. This isn't about pets. This is about philosophy. Now let's go deeper. There's a concept in psychology called locus of control. It refers to whether you believe your life is shaped by your own actions or by external forces. People with an internal locus of control believe they have agency. They trust their own judgment. They don't wait for permission to feel a certain way. And research shows that cat owners tend to have a stronger internal locus of control than dog owners. Why? Because living with a cat trains you to stop expecting the world to meet you on your terms. A cat won't come when you call just because you want it to. It won't comfort you on demand. It won't validate your mood. So you learn to regulate yourself, to find your own center, to stop outsourcing your emotional stability to external approval. And over time, that builds something most people never develop: self-sufficiency without isolation. You can be alone and be fine. You can be with others and still be yourself. That's not coldness. That's emotional maturity. Here's where it gets even more interesting. In 2014, researchers at Indiana University studied the psychological effects of watching cat videos online. Yes, really. They found that viewing cats, even digitally, reduced anxiety and increased feelings of hope and happiness. But the effects were strongest in people who identified as cat lovers. Why? Because your brain had already wired a neural pathway between cats and emotional safety. Every time a cat chose to trust you, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, learned that closeness didn't require sacrifice, that you could be loved without changing who you are. So now, even the idea of a cat activates that same neural circuit. It reminds your nervous system you are enough as you are. That's not trivial. That's a survival mechanism. Let's talk about what people get wrong. Society romanticizes loyalty. The dog who waits by the door, the friend who never questions you, the partner who's always available. But loyalty without boundaries isn't love. It's dependency. And you know that. You've seen relationships where one person gives everything and the other takes it for granted. You've watched people lose themselves trying to be indispensable. You've felt the exhaustion of being needed more than you're known. So when people say you're distant, what they really mean is you won't perform closeness to make them comfortable. And that threatens them, because if connection doesn't require performance, then what they've been doing their whole lives might have been unnecessary. You're not cold, you're honest. And honesty in a world built on social scripts looks like rebellion. Here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Loving cats means you've made peace with something deeply uncomfortable. That love can't be controlled. You can't make a cat love you. You can't guilt it. You can't guilt it. You can't manipulate it with need. All you can do is show up. Be consistent. Be safe. Be safe. And trust that if the connection is real, it will choose you back. That requires a level of emotional risk most people avoid their entire lives. Because what if you show up and it walks away? What if you're kind and it doesn't respond? What if you're enough and it still chooses elsewhere? Most people can't handle that uncertainty. So they choose relationships where the outcome is guaranteed, where love is transactional, where affection is a contract, not a choice. But you don't want guaranteed, you want real. And that's why you'll always prefer a cat that chooses you over a dog that has no other option. Let me tell you what this means for your life. You've probably been told you're hard to read, that you don't need people enough, that you should be more open, more available, more willing to meet others halfway. But here's what your brain knows that theirs doesn't. Meeting someone halfway only works if both people are walking toward the same thing. And most people aren't walking toward connection. They're walking toward validation. They want you to prove you care, to perform emotions so they feel secure, to give more than they do so they feel valued. But you stopped playing that game a long time ago, not because you're selfish, because you learned that real intimacy doesn't require proof, it just requires presence. Here's the final piece. In 2021, a study from the University of Cambridge examined the brain activity of pet owners while they interacted with their animals. When cat owners sat quietly with their cats, their brains showed increased activity in the default mode network. That's the part of your brain active during rest, introspection, and self-referential thought. In other words, being with a cat didn't pull you out of yourself. It allowed you to return to yourself. Dog owners, by contrast, showed more activity in the social cognition network, the part of the brain that processes other people's emotions and intentions. Neither is wrong, that they serve different needs. If your nervous system is already overstimulated by the world, you don't need more social engagement. You need space to integrate, to process, to breathe, to process, to breathe. And the cat gives you that. It sits beside you without asking questions. It exists in the same room without demanding attention. It offers companionship without cost. And in that quiet, your brain finally gets to rest. So, here's what I want you to understand. You're not broken for preferring cats. You're not distant for valuing space. You're not cold for refusing to perform affection you don't feel. You're wired differently. And that wiring has made you better at something most people never learn: how to be close without losing yourself. You've built a life where connection is chosen, not coerced, where love is reciprocal, not desperate, where solitude is strength, not shame. And the people who don't understand that will keep calling you aloof. Let them, because you know something they don't, too. That the deepest bonds aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones that don't need to prove themselves. They're the ones that sit quietly beside you, asking for nothing and somehow giving you everything. If this made you see yourself differently, there's more where this came from. Next time, we'll talk about the psychology of people who need silence to think clearly, and why that might be the most misunderstood trait in the modern world.